A lot of people immigrate to the US for opportunity. But I'd like to think that my parents, both born and raised in India, came here for the adventure. So I'm not talking about Indiana Jones style adventure, snake pits, fighting off gangs of thieves. To me, adventure is about embracing the unknown and the discomfort that comes with the unknown. It's that sense of adventure that's guided my career as a food writer. So let me back up. This is my dad, or at least this is what he looked like 4 decades ago. In 1977, after graduating from India Institute of Technology, which he reminds me is 5 percentage points more difficult to get into than Harvard, with a degree in computer science, he decided to come to the US. His degree wasn't actually that useful in India. All he could get employed as is a data entry clerk. But if he came to America, he could get a job in programming. He decided to first apply to a bunch of graduate schools for computer science over here because my dad's always told me that the Indian way dictates that graduate degrees are kind of like pantsuits. The more you have, the more qualified you'll be to do just about anything. So my dad went to the University of Southern California because that's the place that offered him the most scholarship money. But he didn't just fly to Los Angeles from India. When he went to the travel agent, he was offered a kind of unconventional deal, this loophole that existed back then that essentially allowed you to see the world for the cost of a single plane ticket. I'll let my dad explain because he's a very good storyteller.
In those days, you could shop around for a ticket, and this travel agent was known through family connections. He was a Sikh, Sardar, a good guy,
Yeah.
So he said, yeah, don't worry, I'll get you a ticket. And, he said, look, you're going all the way to Los Angeles. Hey, you want to do a little bit of tourism while you're there? I said, sure, why not? He said, look, in those days, if you reached a place and you missed your flight because of timings, the airline actually said, they transported you to a hotel, they put you up, they paid for all your meals, they transported you back. It was a pretty good deal. So he said, look, I'll engineer it such that every time you reach your destination, you will miss your connecting flight. Okay? And so that's what he did. So as a result, I got to see Bangkok, I got to see Manila, I got to see Hong Kong, I got to see Tokyo, and I got to see Vancouver.
So how much did this cost, this ticket?
Well, the price on the ticket is about 7,500 rupees, which was a lot of fortune at that.
7,500 rupees is about $105. Can you imagine being offered that deal today? This is what his boarding pass looked like for every single flight. Back then, my dad had never left India. He had only ever eaten Indian food. He had barely even been on a plane. It took him a week to get to America. He wasn't a very adventurous eater going into the trip, but he was kind of forced to stretch his palate. Along the way, he ate noodles at a street stall in Bangkok. He got one of the first tastes of what would become his favorite food, pizza, topped with tomato sauce and mozzarella, in Manila, of all places. He marveled at the automatic flush function of the toilets in Tokyo. And then he landed in Los Angeles, his first time on American soil. The first restaurant he went to was a local spot called Burger King. He was a vegetarian when he arrived in the US, and he saw cheeseburger on the menu. He saw cheese and assumed it was vegetarian, and he loved it. This may seem unbelievable to you, but consider the fact that my dad, who is a computer whiz and a low-key genius, thought until only a few months ago that donuts were baked and not fried. Eventually, one of his classmates revealed the unfortunate truth about cheeseburgers, and so my dad just decided that he was not a vegetarian anymore. He tells me that his best food memories from those years are of the soft tacos rolled up with chicken and veggies and pico de gallo from this one stall near campus on Figueroa Street. He would actually amass the pico de gallo and then use it as a topping on pizza. My dad met my mom in 1980 when he flew back to India to get an arranged marriage. They decided to get married after only knowing each other for a few days. He always tells me he was attracted to my mom's sense of adventure. That turned out to be exceedingly true. Where my dad had a sense of adventure, my mom had a thirst for it. She got a job working as a software engineer in the airline industry and then quickly got poached into management. That meant she was flying all around the world to South Africa, England, the Middle East, negotiating deals. I have so many memories of my mom racing out the door with her luggage as I was eating my breakfast and getting ready for school. But what was coolest about my mother's job is that as a family, we got to stand by for free on most American Airlines flights. So very often we would pack our bags with flip-flops and winter scarves, not quite sure which city we'd be going to or if we'd just end up coming straight back home. We were so lucky and privileged to get to travel all over the world. And in no area were we more adventurous than in the food. Granted, we were vegetarians, but we ate tagine in Morocco and the silkiest hummus drizzled with glugs of olive oil and a dusting of red chili powder in Egypt, and crumbly scones with clotted cream and jam in England. We were a dal chawal family, so all this food was new and different and exciting to us. And then my mom would come home and attempt to recreate these dishes tweaked for our taste buds, which usually meant more chilies, more garlic, and more salt. I ended up rating my cookbook Indianish, and it's basically an ode to my mom and these amazing dishes that she came up with inspired by her travel, like a spicy peppery ribollita that's a riff on one we had in Tuscany, or a stir fry of noodle-like bits of roti and veggies that's similar to something she ate on the streets of Sri Lanka. What I've admired most in my parents through all this is that they've never been scared of what they don't know. When they step into a new country, they aren't uncomfortable that the color of their skin is different than everyone else's. They're okay with the fact that they don't speak the language. It's become so normal to them not fitting in as immigrants to this country. It didn't faze them to have the same experience in other places. I remember that when 9/11 happened, my mom once casually told my sister and me that we had to dress a little nicer when we went to the airport. We always allotted extra time to allow for the fact that my dad always got pulled aside for extra screening. And then in 2009, when my sister and I were in college, my mom just decided to move our family to the Philippines for 2 years for her job. We weren't scared. Travel always got us excited, no matter what. I can't think of anything that has shaped my life and my career more than my parents' sense of adventure. I became a food writer because I was curious in the way that my dad was when he came to this country. I wanted to go to places that hadn't been widely covered and eat things I hadn't eaten and meet people who had different perspectives than my own. I feel really strongly that food is quite possibly the best lens through which to understand someone else. There's always a food angle. I've explored quite a bit for my job. I've been really lucky, maybe not to the Middle East or South Africa. I've accepted that I'll never be as cool as my mother. But I've been to Lexington, Kentucky to report about how restaurants are combating the opioid crisis, and Salt Lake City, where I found a thriving Hawaiian restaurant in this frigid mountain town. I don't just get interested in my stories, I become obsessed with them. Growing up with all that travel and having parents who were immigrants, I became so used to being an outsider in a new place. They were constantly putting me in those situations. We weren't traveling to the same place every summer. We were always plunged into the unknown. Greece, China, Egypt. When that's your regular state of being, you're used to being an observer, feeling uncomfortable, and having to ask a lot of questions. I wish I could tell you my parents are both still world travelers. My mom is. She's very into hiking right now. But my dad recently told me that the prospect of taking that 1-week trip through all those cities now seems insane to him. He's gotten really jaded about travel, mainly because of globalization. He says a lot of cities just start to look more homogenized. You can have pizza or McDonald's anywhere, he says. He has a bad back. He loves his life in Texas, where he has now lived longer than anywhere else, including India. He doesn't lament the loss of a sense of adventure, though. I think he might be living vicariously through mine. Every time I come back from reporting a story, he's the first person I call to give a rundown of everything I saw. He's the first person to read all my pieces and comment on my YouTube videos. He's the one I text whenever I'm on the plane about to take off for a new destination. It's hard to imagine, but I could end up like my dad, an armchair adventurer, most comfortable at home, where my mattress is calibrated to my preferred firmness, and there's always a fresh batch of yogurt in the fridge. Thankfully, I've inherited his love of storytelling, so I'll be the one lounging on the sofa, recounting tales to my kids of climbing through the pyramids of Giza and eating tagine on a sand dune, and I'll make sure they know they come from a family of adventurers. Thank you.